I didn't know my grandmother well. She was a stern, reclusive woman who left our family when my mother was still a child. When she passed away, I never expected to inherit her long-abandoned tea house. Hidden deep in the misty mountains of Japan's northern countryside, I should have left it as it was, forgotten and untouched by time. But there was something about that crumbling building that called to me, whispering through the tangled paths of overgrown bamboo. I was an architect, after all. Restoring such places was in my blood. I convinced myself that renovating the tea house would bring some closure, an offering to the past that could finally lay her memory to rest. The place was worse than I'd imagined. Its tatami mats rotting, shoji screens torn to shreds, and the once vibrant wood panels dulled by decades of neglect. My grandmother's belongings were still scattered throughout: faded kimonos, yellowed paper lanterns, and a porcelain tea set arranged neatly on a low table as if she were expecting a visitor. My first night there was shrouded in the kind of silence that felt heavy, like a shroud draped over the tea house. The air hung thick with the scent of old incense, the kind that lingers long after the smoke has dissipated. I lay on a futon in the tatami room, staring up at the rafters. I must have drifted off because I woke abruptly to a strange sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping like long fingernails against wood. I held my breath, straining to locate its source. It seemed to come from above, just below the roof. I thought of tanuki or stray cats, but the sound was too precise, too deliberate, each tap measured like a finger tracing out an invisible pattern. I crept to the hallway, my feet brushing against faded, dusty floorboards. The sound led me to a narrow stairwell, one I hadn't noticed before. It descended not to the second floor, but downward into the cold earth beneath the tea house. A chill ran through me. My grandmother's letters never mentioned a basement, yet there it was, a hidden place steeped in shadows. I hesitated at the top step, the air below carrying a faint, sickly sweet smell, like plum wine that had soured. I turned away and tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. That night, I heard it again. The tapping, clearer this time, accompanied by the rustling of silk and the soft hum of a woman's voice. A lullaby, slow and broken, seeping through the floorboards. The next morning, I searched every corner of the tea house, looking for hidden compartments or trick doors, but I found nothing. As I moved through the house, something caught my eye. A small lacquered box tucked away beneath an old scroll depicting a woman shrouded in fog. I lifted the box carefully, the wood creaking under my touch. It was locked, and no key in the house seemed to fit. That evening, I laid the box on the table in the main room and stared at it, contemplating what it might contain. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the open shoji screens, and I heard it, the hum, now louder, coming from the box itself. My hands trembled as I reached for it. Then, a piercing cry echoed from outside. I stumbled back, knocking the box to the floor. The cry grew softer, morphing into a whisper, a voice speaking in rapid, harsh Japanese. I barely caught the words, "Ureshi modota." I'm happy. You've come back. I shuddered, backing away until my back hit the wall. Through the rice paper screens, I saw a silhouette, slender, draped in a flowing kimono. The figure moved slowly, gliding along the outer corridor. I froze. The silhouette paused outside the door, head tilting in a manner that seemed almost curious. I whispered a prayer under my breath, the words feeling hollow in the suffocating quiet. When I dared to look again, the figure was gone, but the air felt charged, a crackling energy that made every hair on my neck stand on end. That night, I locked myself in the room and didn't sleep. The next morning, I called my mother. I told her about the box, the silhouette, the voice. There was silence on the other end of the line before she finally spoke, her voice tight and laced with fear. "Did you find her camisa?" she asked. I didn't understand. She explained, voice trembling, that my grandmother had always kept a camisa, a sacred space dedicated to an ancestor, one who died young and angry. She always said it was for her older sister, my mother whispered. The sister who drowned in the river when she was only 20. Grandmother used to say she could still hear her weeping in the house at night. Goosebumps prickled down my arms. I glanced at the lacquered box. Could it have been a shrine to her? A prison? I couldn't know. But I knew I had to leave. That night I packed my things, but as I turned to leave, a heavy weight fell over me. I heard the box's lid creak open on its own, and the smell of wet earth and old perfume filled the room. The voice returned, no longer singing. It whispered my name, and I felt a frigid hand brush against my cheek, a touch like mist rising from the grave. "Stay with me," it breathed. I bolted. I ran through the darkened house, the shoji screens rattling as if caught in a storm. As I reached the front door, I turned back just once and saw her. A woman, soaked and dripping, her hair hanging in long, stringy tendrils that clung to her pale skin. Her eyes were hollow, black pits that held no light. She raised a hand, pointing at me, lips curling into a smile that split her face unnaturally wide. "I've been waiting." I didn't remember starting the car. I only knew that I drove and drove until the mountains disappeared in the rearview mirror. I never went back to the tea house. I had it boarded up, the box buried deep beneath its foundations. It's quiet now, they say. But on misty nights, the villagers talk about hearing a faint tapping sound coming from the old tea house, followed by a woman's voice drifting through the fog. They say it's the lost sister, waiting for someone to come back and open the box again. After my mother's sudden death, I moved into a quaint cabin deep within the Whispering Woods, a secluded area where my family had spent summers for generations. The silence was thick, interrupted only by the rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. It was a welcome change from the chaotic city life, but soon the tranquility began to morph into something unsettling. At first, the isolation felt peaceful. I spent my days exploring the woods, but as night fell, an inexplicable chill seeped into the cabin. It was more than just the cool air. It felt like an unseen presence enveloping me, pressing down like a weight on my chest. I often found myself reading by the dim light of an old lamp, feeling the temperature drop as shadows flickered at the edges of my vision. One evening, as I settled into bed with a book, I heard a soft rustle beneath the floorboards. It was faint at first, a scratching sound that sent a shiver down my spine. I brushed it off as my imagination, until I heard it again, more distinct this time, like nails scraping against wood. The air turned icy, and I felt an ominous gaze boring into me from the corner of the room. I tried to shake off the sensation, but I couldn't help but glance at the closet door, which stood slightly ajar. My heart raced. What was hiding in there? After a few moments, I bolted from the room, the unease gnawing at me. In the following days, I noticed strange happenings. One afternoon, while trying to take a nap, I was jolted awake by a low, guttural growl emanating from beneath the bed. My heart hammered as I remembered the way my childhood dog would curl up at my feet. This growl, however, was deep and menacing, unlike anything I had ever heard. It was as if something or someone was trying to mimic the familiar comfort of a pet. I cautiously crept to the door, only to find that the handle wouldn't turn. Panic set in as the growl grew louder, mixing with the sound of heavy breathing. I glanced at my reflection in the darkened window, and for a fleeting moment I thought I saw a shadow behind me. A hulking figure that vanished the instant I turned around. My nights were consumed by sleeplessness, the whisper of the woods creeping into my mind. I would hear my mother's voice calling me from the depths of the forest, a sweet melody tinged with a haunting edge. But when I ventured out searching for her, I found only the trees, standing silent and still, as if hiding secrets from me. Weeks passed, and then one stormy night the shadows grew bold. I stood in the living room, facing the cabin's window as rain lashed against the glass. Lightning illuminated the woods, revealing a dark figure lurking just beyond the tree line, watching me with eyes that glowed like embers. Fear froze me in place until a frantic scratching from the bedroom shattered my daze. It sounded just like my mother's desperate voice calling from beyond the veil of darkness. I rushed into the room, but the growling had morphed into something worse, a symphony of cries that echoed the sadness I felt since my mother's death. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by sorrow and confusion, until I spotted a glint of something beneath the bed. Reaching out, I pulled it into the light, a small, tattered locket, one I recognized as my mother's. In that moment, clarity washed over me. The haunting presence had been an echo of her grief, a shadow of unresolved love twisted by despair. But as the realization settled, the growling returned, louder than ever. I turned to find the figure had entered the room, my mother, or rather something that had taken her place, its eyes cold and hollow. I stumbled back, heart racing as it whispered, "You can't leave me." But it was too late. I darted out of the cabin, the weight of the woods pressing in on me, and I ran. The last thing I heard was the echo of her voice fading into the wind, a mournful reminder of what I had lost, and the darkness that still lurked within the whispering woods. Thanks for diving into the shadows with us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the truth is scarier than fiction. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.